couple of bantamweight win streaks are on the line. We don't get to say that very often in this women's 135-pound division. We have Panama's own La Pantera, who trains with La Pantera, Joselyn Edwards. She's taking on Czechia's own Lucie Pudilova. And you know Lucie Pudilova. I mean, she had Fight of the Nights in the UFC.
Exactly.
She got banished from the UFC. She went over to Octagon, went on a very, very tidy streak, lost to former UFC bantamweight Talita Bernardo. The win streak carried her back in, and last year she comes back, she takes on Wu Yanan, and she goes out there and finishes her, which is a huge surprise for Pudilova, getting that finish win after so many decisions outside of the company. So a great move for Pudilova, who's really switched things up, and not necessarily training in her native Czechia. She's been training for quite a while out of SBG Ireland. You have John Kavanagh in the corner. You had that Conor McGregor lineage there with some of the pictures on her Instagram getting ready for the Wu Yanan fight. But of late, if you look at it for Pudilova, and I made this a big part of my tape study and my notes, the fact that she finished second in the London IBJJF Open Championships, and she really has made grappling a focal point of her game that not only won her the fight against Wu Yanan, but it seems to be a growing discipline that she's added into her overall mixed martial arts.
And I won't go as far to say that she is two completely different versions of herself between the first iteration that we got of her in the UFC and this newer one, but you can definitely tell that the grappling has been a huge part of her game, especially as of late, because when you go back and think about her fights with like Irene Aldana, that fight was primarily contested on the feet. That was one of those fight of the nights that you spoke about earlier in the video, and that was sort of the lasting image that I always had about Pudilova. It was, hey, she's gonna go out there, she doesn't really have one-punch knockout power, the striking will look a little bit awkward, she's one of those strikers who, it's odd, but her shoulders are high, she holds her arms very high up.
It really was kind of like a Nosferatu type of herky-jerky striking, but the thing that I've seen out of Pudilova, and you might not like what I'm about to say, but I said this about Cynthia Calvillo, goes to Syndicate, cleans things up. Some people thought that she beat Lupe Godinez over the weekend, but for Lucie Pudilova, really able to move well on the feet as she's gone from Octagon and back into the UFC.
I agree 100%, but my issue is, it's not like that movement leads to a lot, and that's been the interesting thing, because she does have a game that goes, okay, I can give my opponents trouble on the feet, make them shoot on me, and then I'm their worst nightmare, or vice versa. They're a little bit more skilled of a striker than I am. I have the ability to then transition my footwork and my striking into takedowns, because we have seen much more of a progression out of her as of late. You brought up that amateur fight that she once had against a 17-year-old where she gets ground and pounded.
Pudilova went outside of the UFC, fought with Octagon, and during the pandemic, they tried to throw everybody a bone and help them out, and I say that because in the pre-fight build-up to that fight, Pudilova was arm curling her dog, so it was kind of an odd one, but it was a weird mixed rule set where you weren't supposed to go for takedowns. Yeah. Teresa Bleda did. Bleda was on this past season of the Ultimate, or not the Ultimate Fighter, Dana White's Contender Series. She ended up losing in that bout when she ended up making it a little bit further. But when you look at it, yeah, I mean, for Pudilova, it's been a strange progression, but a nice one. Very welcome.
It has been, but think about a guy like Max Holloway, where every single fight that we ever saw him on the way to the title, he was adding this massive new part to his game. For Pudilova, she is adding stuff, but I do feel like there's a bit of a lack of synergy between some of the things that she's adding. I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying. It's just, if she was a little bit better of a wrestler, I think her game would look so much better and so much more complete. Because again, she is very heavy on top. She does a really good job of getting, it's not really back control, but just kind of digging the hooks in, getting that back mount. She's very good from those positions. I just think the wrestling is going to give her some troubles, and especially against someone like Edwards, who, again, if Pudilova is going to win this fight, the grappling is probably going to be a big part of it, but if Edwards can use her own footwork and her own kicks to just keep this fight very far apart from her opponent, I could see her being able to have her own success in the feet.
I don't know about that. I mean, for Pudilova, spending time at Atlanta Gym and SBG, when you look at it and you look at how Joselyn Edwards has lost fights in the UFC, especially those two, it was the wrestling and the grappling of Jessica Rose Clark. It was the wrestling and grappling of Carol Hossa, who could volume strike on the outside if she so decided to, but she had a lot of success with the takedowns. Though. When you look at the two wins that Edwards has of late, she had some troubles on the scale. She fought that one fight at featherweight against Ramona Pascual, got completely blown apart at the end of the first round in that one, found herself back into the fight as it went on, and if you look at it for Joselyn Edwards, her last time out, missed weight at 137.5 against Jiyeon Kim, won a split decision. Majority of the folks out there, if not all of them, thought that Edwards had won 2 of those 3 rounds comfortably. For Edwards coming into the UFC, I mean, where MMA math plays a part, she looked really good against Wu Yanan, really worked in some of that striking, but Edwards, as I said, I mean, she trains with La Pantera Antonina Shevchenko, who might have a trick up her sleeve because she fought a 2-round fight of the night against Lucie Pudilova on that 4-fight skid before Pudilova was out of the UFC. Pudilova, as you mentioned, had a fight of the night against Irina Aldana as well. So again, I do worry a little bit about the weight of somebody like Joselyn Edwards. We know how good her striking is. She's really kind of based herself, not just in the States, because at one point she was in Iowa, then she was in California, like she was Robbie Lawler in Iowa. Then she went to California, now she's at the UFC PI, getting ready with those Shevchenko sisters, and kind of a revolving door of fighters that do train there. You consider for Edwards, the volume striking is definitely on point. 164 to 63 were those strikes against one Ramona Pascual. So we look at the odds, and I was surprised. I thought, okay, Edwards is going to be favored in this fight, much better distance striker. She's actually the underdog in the matchup ever so slightly. So we have a look at those Tapology votes, the famous ones. It's a surprise to us as it is to you. And even with Pudilova, Matt, as a slight favorite, I'm going to say over under 62.5% Edwards is the favorite.
I think it'll be under.
You think it's going to be under? And apparently I have no friggin' gauge on this fight. 971 total votes, 70% Pudilova, large majority by decision. For the 30% that have Edwards, large majority by decision once more. And I guess the question really is, if Pudilova's the favorite, if the fans all have Pudilova, do you have Pudilova?
I do, but ever so slightly. This is a very difficult fight to predict, and like I said, I think Edwards is going to win a lot of the moments on the feet. You might disagree with that, but I still think her at range with the kicks, it's just going to keep Pudilova far enough away from her, because this is the one negative of Pudilova's game that you can see in all of her fights. She reaches really far with her punches, and that does concern me. Not that she's a bad striker, because when her volume's going, it is like an avalanche, and there's a lot behind it, but to get the car started, or to get like a lawnmower started, you gotta pull it a couple times. For Pudilova, she'll leave herself a little bit open, and I do worry about some of those spots against a striker like Edwards, but I don't know if Edwards is that one-hitter quitter that can really hurt her bad enough on the feet to then kind of dissuade her from going for some of those takedowns later on. So ever so slightly, I'll go with Pudilova, and I'll say this, it's not because I think she's going to complete a lot of takedowns. I think there's going to be a lot of clinch in this fight, if I'm being honest, and I think a lot of those positions are going to be Pudilova holding Edwards against the cage, and for that reason, I Pudilova.
You pull start the lawnmower, and then you shut the choke off. When you shut the choke off, Pudilova really getting started. She's throwing hooks to close the distance to go in for the takedown. I like that out of Pudilova, but the trouble is when you take on somebody like Joselyn Edwards, does she throw leg kicks? Does she throw body kicks as a teep in a roundhouse? Will she go to the head? She throws those kicks from so many different levels to keep her opponents guessing, to bring their hands up and down, to where if she can dictate that range, it's Edwards all day. I like the complete game out of somebody like Lucie Pudilova, but you definitely let us know who you have down below in that comment section. Both of us going with Czechia's Lucie Pudilova to get the win. 14 total fights on the card. The co-main event's Edson Barboza versus Billy Quarantillo. And if you're not excited about that, you should be. You're going to want to keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks. We always say, let's get into it.